Hi, I'm Eleanor, and welcome to this week's edition of the Intuition Lab. This week, I'm going to talk about how to honor traditions and yourself without burning yourself out. Do you really have to do the most? I mean, it's the holiday season. It's just December 2nd as of this recording. And I think for many of us, if you're in the US, you've already got through Thanksgiving. If you're overseas, then maybe you're gearing up for Christmas and other December holidays. But how can you honor tradition and yourself at the same time without burning yourself out, being miserable, having anything but a joyful, peaceful next month to 5 or 6 weeks? So, I'm going to invite you to almost treat it a little bit like client work. And I know it's a bit of an odd association, but I want you to create a holiday proposal for yourself. So, as ever, I'm going to invite you to tune in intuitively, however you best do that, be it, visualization, maybe you hear things, maybe you receive signs from outside of yourself, all of the above. That's true for me. But let's just breathe into our center, ground ourselves, ground, shield, shed. Ideally, be around your energetic five. But for work like this, pretty much know what you want, and it's probably fairly close to the surface. So tune in intuitively and ask yourself, what's your overall objective for this season? Perhaps you have religious motivations, so that will be your focus. Maybe it's that and family. Maybe it's just family. Maybe it's time off. Maybe it's a time of assessment. What you accomplished this year, what you would like your next year and the years beyond to look like. But let's look at it this way. What do you want to do or feel? You, first and foremost. Do you want to feel cozy, happy, included, time alone? Sort of like what I talked about last week, getting clear on what you want. So listen to that again if you need some extra reinforcement around what you specifically want. Then also, what's your desired outcome? Do you want to feel like you've reconnected with friends and family? Do you want to, have gotten out and about and done lots of things? Do you want to, you know, cement family connections? Do you want to, you know, build your fortress that is your home, right? What do you want? And how do you want to feel at the end of December or by the middle of January? How do you want to feel at the end of all of this? That's really important because, as I spoke about before, once you have clarity, it becomes so much easier to say yes or no to things that maybe you really don't want to do. But in terms of holiday preparation, not only do you want to know what's your purpose behind doing something or going somewhere, but who are you doing this for and why? I think this often comes up with people who have children. Are you doing this for you? Or are you doing it for them? Like I think about pictures with Santa. Whenever I've been in spaces where there are pictures with Santa, I would say a good half of the children probably don't want to be there. Um, I think this is largely for parents to have something to back in the day to show off or to post online, but know who you're doing this for and why, and do they really appreciate it? Can they, or would they appreciate it? I mean, children that are very young might not appreciate being tossed into the lap of some random stranger and being told to smile, right? Some are very comfortable with that, but you want to know who you're doing something for and why. Also, if your family members like doing something that you really don't enjoy, and you're the person who has to put it on, are you comfortable disappointing people close to you? I think that's really important in terms of, especially life design, designing your life the way you want it. You can disappoint people without being a terrible person, right? If something would really drain you, you don't have to do it. Maybe you can find someone else to do it. But if you can't, maybe it just doesn't happen this year. Maybe it doesn't ever happen again, right? And someone else can pick up the torch further down the line. But it doesn't have to be you. Now, once we've done talking about what you want to do, your outcome, what's the purpose behind something, who are you doing it for, and why, that brings us to traditions because so much of the holiday chaos, right? And energetic drains, I think, are related to traditions that really don't align with you. Perhaps they never did, maybe they no longer do. But is the tradition still worth it to you to maintain? You know, maybe you always went to the Christmas tree farm to get a live tree. And I realize I'm very Christmas focused, but I'm speaking from my experience. But I think this is readily extensible and applicable no matter what you celebrate. You know, maybe the time has come to get a good quality fake tree so you don't have to deal with the cutting down and the putting it in water and the topping up the water and all of the fuss that comes with having a live Christmas tree. Is that still worth it to you to maintain? Maybe you can't handle that this year. Maybe you always decorate the outside of the house with lights, and this year it's just not viable for whatever reason. Is it worth it to you? So, I'm going to suggest that you create something called a minimum viable holiday. This sort of is reflective of my software background. I worked in software field and IT for about 15 years, and I've worked in startups or places where there was product development. And there's a concept known as a minimum viable product. Like, what are the minimum features you need to put in something to ship it out? And I think it's true of any product or service based business. Like, if you are a baker, what, what's the minimum sort of product suite you need to have to bring people in the door, right? But what I invite you to do through this is determining the minimum of what you would do to make yourself happy. Next, what would you need to do to please the people around you without draining yourself? Come up with your bare minimum and then add options on top of that. So, this is where it's intuition and a bit of data. And if you don't have data, then you can, you know, tune intuitively, make your best informed decision based on the information you have. But I think of it almost as a package. So, what is the bare minimum you could do? Maybe it's important to your family that you have a holiday potluck like you've done forever, that you exchange, small gifts, like have a secret Santa and go caroling. I'm just making this up. Maybe that's the bare minimum that you've polled people, or that people feel the most satisfied and happy afterwards. And maybe other events like going out to see a tree lighting or whatever, maybe that is more of a bother than it's worth. So, first, come up with the bare minimum, right? And then come up with options, like package B, maybe you add two other activities. Package C, maybe you host a New Year's event, right? But you break it out in terms of, ease to accomplish, what you feel the most energetically and intuitively aligned with, what would please the people around you without you resorting to martyrdom. And then compare that to what you generally do if you feel that you're knocking yourself out. And I bet you there's going to be a lot you can either A, throw away, or B, outsource, right? Or postpone until later on. So now I'm going to circle back to traditions. They are important. I speak as someone who most of my immediate family that I would have celebrated Christmas past with, they are either in spirit or I live far away from them. And for me, it's really wondering like what traditions are important for me? What can I do to honor the people who came before me? But also know that sometimes traditions have run their course. I mentioned the hauling your kid out to see Santa, or some people have, weekend parties on the weekend during the holiday season, like before or even after Christmas. Maybe you started doing it because it was a fun way for your kid to invite all of their kindergarten class over. But now your child is 21 and either away from home or living at home, and they just rather hang out with their people, right? Do you have to still put on this huge bash? I'm speaking from the example of a family I know where they put on a cookie decorating party. They started it when their children, who are now in their 30s, and one lives nearby, the other one lives halfway across the world. And they're still putting it on. And I guess it brings them some measure of satisfaction, but you don't have to continue doing that. Um, sometimes things have run their course. Sometimes you have some traditions that need to make a comeback. One that I personally think needs to make a comeback is maybe three presents per child, the something to wear, something to read, and something you need. And people have variations on that instead of a sea of presents that will probably be forgotten. Sometimes when you edit things down to a minimum, people are more appreciative of the options in front of them. So that's some food for thought. But, are there traditions that need to make a comeback? Instead of you paying tons of money to have something catered, can everything be a potluck, right? If you are having financial difficulty this year, maybe you can start the tradition of a potluck where maybe individually people wouldn't have a very, I don't know, fulfilling, happy holiday season. But if you pool your resources, you can have a good party, have some good meals, right? Maybe you can do a hot chocolate party instead of, going somewhere. Maybe you'll get together and bake cookies and make hot chocolate. And I'm bringing that up as a sort of prosaic example, but you get the idea. But sometimes things have just run the course for you. But there's someone around you who would be happy to pick up the torch. Maybe someone who now has young children would like to pick up the holiday party torch because they can inject new blood. They have the energy for it. It seems new, fresh, and exciting to them to show up in this way. And you can just be a guest. You can get as involved or as not as you want. You can be an advisor. Maybe you can help them, especially if you're handing off something that you've done for decades, maybe. You can sort of train your replacement in a manner of speaking, right? You can still assist, but it's not all on you. And I especially think about Thanksgiving meals. We all know someone who goes all out, and maybe they love it, maybe they do it grudgingly, but you generally don't have to do these things alone. But this all comes back to knowing what you want. And if you are not a visualizer, think about the sensory file I talked about last week and the week before. Like, is there a scent that just reminds you of the holidays? So is it like, simmering potpourri or mulled cider or pine or whatever it is that's pleasant, right? Um, Create that sensory file and then build activities around that. But ultimately, for your success this season, you just need to know what that looks like for you and determine the bare minimum that would please you first, then other people. And just know the biggest gift you can give to yourself is sometimes reality. No, not everyone's going to be happy, especially if you're changing something that's been done for decades. And that's okay. What's important here is that you show up in good faith. You do what you can and you clearly communicate this. Just say, if you always throw in lavish holiday spreads for meals or parties, just say, this year it is not possible. And you can talk about the reasons like time, energy, finances, whatever. Clearly communicate, set the expectation of what people will experience when they show up. Or you can even say, well, this year I can, you know, roast a turkey, put out a vegetable roast if that's what you can do, but I'm going to need you, and you can even delegate specifically, I'm going to need people to bring sides, salads, drinks, desserts, entertainment. Anyone here, a fledgling DJ who can provide music or has a killer like online playlist they want to share with me? Um, Communicate, set expectations, right? And take other people's desires into account, but don't let yourself be ruled by it. I think that's where a lot of the burnout comes from. And I think your intuition will really show you what to focus on. So I invite you to create this holiday proposal for yourself. Create this minimum viable holiday. And you can apply it to any sort of event. weddings, other family gatherings, work events. Just know what would intuitively tune in and find out what would cover the bases, what would just provide the minimum you need to provide for a happy gathering. I tell you, it is a lot less than you think. I think if I think about my most remembered and cherished experiences being a child, it was just sitting under the lit up Christmas tree that my grandmother would put up in her darkened living room and just enjoying the cozy feeling, just looking at that tree. It didn't really matter as much what was under it. It's just the feeling, the goodwill, and the love that you create. So, with that, I am going to sign off and send you so much love for now. Remember, if you are having trouble managing with the holidays and you would like to take a more intuitive approach to it, I invite you to join Pathfinders, where I am running over the next now 4 weeks or 5 weeks, intuitively surviving the holidays within my Pathfinders free community on Telegram. You can come, we can go into these weekly prompts in depth, and you can get some one-on-one intuitive guidance from me about how to deal with your holiday issue. So until next week, I am sending you so much love. I wish you peace, and I encourage you to create your own minimum viable holiday. Bye now.